The head coaching tier list video that has been highly requested. It is the only tier list video that we have not put out on the channel. I know I'm late to the party on this. I've been watching some other analysts produce their head coaching tier list, and I gotta say, I've been pretty disappointed. Some of the tier lists that I've seen from these other analysts have been quite disappointing to me, and I'm gonna go full screen for a second. I am well aware that the tier list I am about to make and the tier list I am about to show you will not only be highly controversial, but will be one of my what's the word, most different opinions than general consensus. On quarterback rankings, maybe I got a guy here or there, same with wide receiver rankings. My head coach rankings, I think, are very, very different from what you see generally in the media. And I'm well aware I'm going to get some backlash. I'm well aware there's going to be a, how do you have that guy so high? How do you have that guy so low? I will explain. If you want to argue with me in the comments section, so be it. Let's hop into the tier list. All right, so obviously we have to start with the to be determined tier. We have Aaron Glenn, we have Ben Johnson, we have Kellen Moore, we have Liam Cohen, we have Brian Schottenheimer. These guys are first-year head coaches for their teams this upcoming season, and I haven't seen them coach in recent history as a head coach. I think that these guys are all actually going to be fairly solid, aside from Schottenheimer. I have my worries there, but I think Ben Johnson really could land anywhere from good to special on this list after year one. Aaron Glenn, I expect him to be great to good. Kellen Moore, I do think, could fall between mid and great. Same with Liam Cohen. And Schottenheimer, I think, could fall from anywhere from hot seat to good in his first year. But at the end of the day, that is just purely projection at this point in time. I really have no actual case to back up where I would rank these guys. So I think it's only fair that for the time being, we put them in the to be determined category as we would a rookie coming into the league. My hot seat category has two names, and maybe that's a little low, but Shane Steichen and Zac Taylor. Steichen, I actually think it might not be his fault. I think Anthony Richardson may have been just too much of a project for the draft capital that the Colts invested in him. But at the end of the day, they brought in Shane Steichen to level up that offense. And when he first came in, a lot of people thought that the Colts offense with Steichen, Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, Pittman, etc. could be the best in the AFC South and have them competing for division titles. And just flatly, they haven't lived up to that level. And some guys are more offensive coordinator than head coach. I think Shane Steichen may be that way. The way he talked about players being late for practice, and yeah, it just happens. Could you imagine Bill Belichick just saying, yeah, it just happens? And I know Bill Belichick's one of the GOATs, but point being, maybe Steichen is more OC than head coach. And Zac Taylor, I think Zac Taylor is one of the biggest problems for Cincinnati. Truthfully, I believe this. I don't think he's that fantastic of an offensive play caller. I just think he got lucky in a situation with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, and a lot of people could call that offense to be somewhat productive. But the Cincinnati Bengals continuously start off slow every single year, and I think that's due to coaching and preparation to be ready for the season. Zac Taylor, for me, on the hot seat, and my prediction for this upcoming year is that he gets fired. Up next, we have the mid category, and maybe this should be mid versus still somewhat unproven, as for guys like we got Callahan and Raheem Morris here. So those two, I'm willing to give them kind of another year to see what they got. Obviously, Raheem Morris had to work with Kirk Cousins for a lot of last year, who was just a shell of himself. And once they got Penix, the team started to look a little bit better. And now they've given his defense some edge rushers. And for Callahan, the guy had Will Levis last year. He had a top 3 defense and Will Levis. I'm willing to just give it a year and see where they're at with Cam Ward. So maybe they could be served for the to be determined, but they have coached, and right now the results are kind of mid. Jonathan Gannon, I think, is a good defensive coordinator, but I'm not sure he's head coach built for the Arizona Cardinals. Some of the problems with this team before he got there are still there. I still question some of Kyler Murray's work ethic and his ability to consistently show up week to week. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a similar problem immediately. Whether you could argue that's offensive scheme or just the team not being ready to go week to week, they were much better at home than on the road, and I think that's a real pure sign of coaching there. So Gannon, for me, is mid at this point, and this is a real prove-it year for him. Mike McDaniel, I thought he was always one of the more overrated head coaches. I think his offense was kind of a one-trick pony. It specialized in getting the ball deep, warm weather, and Tua staying upright. And as soon as things go off script, everything falls apart. Now, some of that is also why I have Tua lower, but I also think Mike McDaniel hasn't shown a second gear as a head coach. And again, similar to Steichen, I view him as a guy who is a much better offensive coordinator than head coach. It's one of my worries for Ben Johnson, to be truthful with you guys. It's possible that you could have the best scheme ever, but you're not a leader of a locker room. McDaniel, when it comes to X's and O's, is solid, but I just don't really view him as a guy who has got a hold of that Miami Dolphins locker room, who holds guys accountable and gets the best out of a culture and his players. And I know people are going to be mad at Stefanski down here. Listen, I think Stefanski is just fine. I think he shouldn't have won that Coach of the Year award 2 years ago. I thought that went to DeMeco Ryans, and it should have. Kevin Stefanski's fine, man. He's like the definition of an okay head coach. I don't think he's going to particularly cost you games. I do think he's going to elevate talent to some level, but I just don't think he's been able to get consistent play from his team at a high level. Maybe some of that's the quarterback room, but I just don't know on the Browns if we're ever going to truly get an answer to that question. Then we move into the good tier, and for reference point, this is where the top 20 starts. These guys are ordered from left to right. So Mike Macdonald is my 20th best head coach in the NFL. I think what he did with Seattle last year was fine, but he didn't elevate them to a playoff level team. And we've seen that team make the playoffs under Pete Carroll. Obviously, the roster was a little bit different and they had to change offensive coordinator. So I'm willing to give Mike Macdonald some more time. The one thing I will say is that Seahawks defense was improved throughout the season. That's his side of the ball, so I respect that. The same basic analysis for Dave Canales here with the Panthers, a guy I was pretty excited to see join this team. Got off to a slow start, had to bench Bryce Young, but by the last month and a half of the season, we saw the Dave Canales effect. Bryce Young takes that leap forward, similar to what we saw out of Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith under Dave Canales. So both of these guys, young head coaches, came into a new situation, but by the end of the year, their side of the ball was doing good. Dan Quinn, I think some of Dan Quinn is a little overrated. I think the fact that he's worked with Kyle Shanahan and Cliff Kingsbury in his most successful tenure so far isn't, a coincidence. I think he needs a really good offensive coordinator, offensive mind paired with him. And if the Commanders do what they did last season, again this season, don't be surprised if Cliff Kingsbury gets a head coaching job. Maybe he takes on one of these two jobs down here. Cliff Kingsbury on the Bengals. That could certainly be interesting. But Dan Quinn is solid. I do think he's a really good culture guy. You could tell that Washington got more effort with Dan Quinn as their head coach than they've had in seasons past. Brian Daboll, I didn't know this. I'm a big Brian Daboll supporter. I have him as a mid-head coach, middle of the pack in terms of he's good, but he's in the middle of the pack for me. He's the 16th best head coach. What is that? 20, 19, 18, 17th best head coach in all of football. He got the best out of Daniel Jones and took Daniel Jones to a playoffs and won a playoff game. If we could just get Brian Daboll a real quarterback that he could mold, like how he did with Josh Allen, I think the Giants could be a real threat with him at head coach. I don't think he's the problem in New York at all. Pete Carroll, we've seen Pete be successful getting up there in age. We'll see what he could do with the Raiders, but the one thing I know about Pete Carroll is he definitely has a culture wherever he goes. He could work well with young talent, obviously from back at his USC days. So I expect the Raiders to win some games this year, Pete Carroll to be at the front of that train, and Pete Carroll, a real fun guy. Todd Bowles, probably one of the more underrated head coaches in all of football, and maybe you think that me having him at 15 is too low, but what he's done with the Buccaneers, the defense is always excellent. He's had a revolving door of offensive coordinators over the past few years. He's got another new offensive coordinator this year, and I don't expect the team to skip a beat. Consistently in the playoffs, consistently winning the division. And then at the top of this tier, we have New England Patriots new head coach Mike Vrabel, but we have seen him recently in Tennessee. And if you are the one seed in the AFC with Ryan Tannehill as your quarterback, winning that division, I think you at least got to be good. But I think it's certainly possible that Vrabel moves up to great or even potentially special by the end of the year. Special might be a stretch though, but if he gets New England to the playoffs, I think it's very possible he moves into my great tier. Then we move into my great tier, and there is a lot to unpack here. We're going to start from right to left. I know that's a little weird, but it'll make sense because we're counting down in descending order. Yes, I have Dan Campbell as the 13th best head coach in the NFL. I've seen lists where he's as high as 3, and I just simply don't understand it. I didn't know I was a Dan Campbell hater. But then I started seeing where other people had him ranked, and I thought, okay, maybe I'm a Dan Campbell hater at this point in time, because top 3 to top 5 is way too high for this guy. I understand that the Lions, before Dan Campbell got there, were just a traditionally shitty team. But Brad Holmes built a really solid roster, and I feel like all the credit for that goes to Dan Campbell at this point in time. Drafting Jahmyr Gibbs, drafting Brian Branch, drafting Aiden Hutchinson. That wasn't Dan Campbell. That was talent that was brought in by Brad Holmes. As well, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, clearly 2 of the best coordinators in football, as they're now both head coaches. Yet again, almost all of the praise was sung on Dan Campbell. And let's talk about Dan Campbell, this guy who is a top 3 head coach in the NFL somehow, yet doesn't have any production to show for that. You guys know on this channel, I value winning. In the first year Dan Campbell comes in, the Lions go 9-8, and they're like, hey, they are a team that potentially could be on the rise. And I think that that was true. I thought that was a great coaching performance from Dan Campbell. The following year, the team finds themselves in the NFC Championship. And you could argue that they shouldn't have been there, but they were there. And they had this high-powered offense. And they had a double-digit lead in the second half of a game to go to the Super Bowl, where they would have played the Chiefs, who, if you remember correctly, they had beaten week 1 of that year. 2 years ago, the Detroit Lions could have been Super Bowl champions. But Dan Campbell's coaching tendencies, aggressiveness, and kind of dumb choices to go for it in spots where he could have just taken points is what cost them that NFC Championship game. It swung momentum for them to not get points on those possessions and feel like they failed, and quickly gave the 49ers resurgence. Dan Campbell cost his team a trip to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. And then last year, the Lions are really good all year, battled throughout injuries. Again, in the regular season, a great performance from Dan Campbell. But what happened in the playoffs? Off of a bye week in a divisional round game, with his team even injured, still being the more talented roster, they did not show up ready to play at all. Both sides of the ball got absolutely crushed. Jared Goff has a terrible game, and the defense gets railroaded. That is part of coaching. Having your team ready to show up for a playoff game at home where you are the better team. After that performance, I am not moving Dan Campbell up, yet some people are. He is moving down for me because of that. A 15-win team with zero playoff wins to show for it. What would we be saying about some of the guys ahead of him if they had done just that? That's all I'm saying. At 12, I got Mike Tomlin. I think Mike Tomlin could get just about any roster in the NFL to 500, but I'm not so sure he could get any roster in the NFL to 12 wins at this point. There is a floor and potentially a clear ceiling with Mike Tomlin. He seemingly doesn't value the quarterback position. His defense is always solid, but the offense leaves something to be desired. He chose to bring in Arthur Smith. He's, part of the reason that they don't heavily pursue a quarterback. He's had say in that front office for a while now. They're fine. He's a great head coach in terms of the fact that he'll give you a really solid baseline, but I don't think he gets up to that exceptional level. Matt LaFleur took a step back for me. This is a guy that I was very high on, but after last year, I think there was some disappointment, and I think there might even be more coming for the Packers this year. Matt LaFleur, a really solid scheme guy, but he just hasn't led his team to be consistently great like we thought the Packers were going to take that leap. Kevin O'Connell, I have one spot above Matt LaFleur because I think he did more with a worse quarterback. Sam Darnold is worse than Jordan Love, and I really question how good Sam Darnold is, and we're going to find out exactly where Kevin O'Connell should rank on this list this year as to what does he do with rookie J.J. McCarthy, and what does Sam Darnold do in Seattle. But I think I would give a higher percentage of that team's success last year to Kevin O'Connell than I would Sam Darnold. John Harbaugh. I have John Harbaugh, what is this, at 9, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. And I get it. Some people are going to be mad about that. This isn't a legacy ranking. Some of this is a what have you done for me lately league. And I don't want to, discredit John Harbaugh. He's in the great tier here. But if you're asking why he's at 9, why so low, His defense has been solid, and he did help develop Lamar Jackson. But again, where's the wins? In games that are 50-50 in the playoffs over the past 2 years, or even more in Baltimore's favor, the Ravens have choked. And some of that's at the feet of Lamar Jackson, but some of that's at the feet of John Harbaugh. I get it that 2 years ago in the AFC Championship, he's not the offensive play caller, but he's a CEO head coach. You need to tell your team to run the ball more. And last year versus Buffalo, he got outcoached and he lost to Sean McDermott. At the end of the day, those losses in impactful games to better coaching has to count against you. And it's counting against John Harbaugh here. Number 8, Kyle Shanahan. I get it. Shanahan missed the playoffs last year, so you could argue the winning measurement there with me. I think the 49ers were ravaged with injuries, but I've also seen Kyle Shanahan take Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy to Super Bowls based on his scheme. Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo, once Brock Purdy plays enough snaps to qualify, will be the 2 leaders in NFL history in average yards per pass attempt. That means it's a Kyle Shanahan stat. If you have Kyle Shanahan and your offense stays healthy, even regardless of the quarterback, I think you're kind of just locked into being a top 10 to 15 offense in all of football. If I was starting a team blankly, Kyle Shanahan's a guy that I'd absolutely love to have, because it's like, hey, we know that we're probably going to have a really solid offense. And I think now that you pair him back with Robert Saleh, I expect more success to come their way. Number 6, I got DeMeco Ryans. I think DeMeco Ryans is number 7, DeMeco Ryans. I think DeMeco Ryans is really solid, and I think he's really underrated. His side of the ball for the Houston Texans over his coaching tenure, you could argue, has been the most consistent and best side of the ball in the NFL. The best defense. Over his coaching tenure, you could argue that. He's great at acquiring talent, great at developing talent, and his team plays with a culture, that swarm mentality that the Houston Texans have, that is instilled by DeMeco Ryans. That's why they made a lot of changes this offseason. Guys like Laremy Tunsil, who are really good players but didn't fit into that culture, DeMeco was willing to move on and get out of the locker room. His culture is there. His side of the ball is exceptional. He's got a really strong quarterback, and I think if the Texans could stay healthy on offense and get a good offensive coordinator, DeMeco Ryans could one day be a Super Bowl winning head coach. Number 6, Nick Sirianni. And I get it. 6 might be too high for some people on Sirianni, but again, what's he done for me? Over the last 4 years, he's made the playoffs 4 times. This is, by the way, his entire coaching tenure started 4 years ago, so I'm not cherry picking here. That's his whole coaching tenure. 2 times he's won his division. 2 times he's won the NFC title game, and he's a 1-time Super Bowl champ. I get it. He can't call offensive plays at a real high level. He is that CEO head coach build, but he's a winner. He establishes a culture. Does he get into it with his players from time to time? Maybe, but it looks like it brings out the best in them. Nick Sirianni, flatly out, wins football games. There's been a lot of head coaches that have had talented rosters that didn't win football games. If we talked about the Lions versus the Eagles at mid-season last year, a lot of people would have said that the Lions had a better roster. Now, obviously, that the Eagles won the Super Bowl, it means that they did, but what did Dan Campbell do with his, 13, 14 plus win team? What did Nick Sirianni do with his now twice? I think the winning has to be valued here. Number 5, I got Sean Payton. Sean Payton, after 2 seasons ago, pretty much blamed Russell Wilson for everything wrong with Denver, and I really kind of questioned him until I saw him get Bo Nix, who was a player that, coming out of college, I was not very high on, but I think Sean Payton immediately got the best out of him. He looked better than I ever saw at Oregon, so he did continue to develop, and he took that Denver Broncos team that probably had no business being in the playoffs to the playoffs. They were a playoff team in year 1 with the Bo Nix, Sean Payton duo. Sean Payton schemes up a great offense, holds his players accountable, has a real strong culture. And at number 4, I'm taking Sean McDermott. I get it. People like to hate on McDermott, but here's the truth about Buffalo. They're always in Super Bowl contention. His side of the ball, the defense, is always top 15 in football. And he is a pretty solid coach in these big games. He's willing to trust it. He made the move to bring in Joe Brady as offensive coordinator and get rid of Ken Dorsey, proving to be a great move. I think he deserves credit for that move. The offense has been very solid. The only team that they've continuously lost to is the Kansas City Chiefs. And obviously, Andy Reid, not yet on this tier list. So losing to Andy Reid isn't going to knock you a ton of points. but they've consistently been the second best team in the AFC, and Sean McDermott deserves some credit for that. We move into the special tier, and yes, I have Jim Harbaugh as my third best head coach in the NFL. Is that high? Am I being a lunatic for this? Maybe. But here's what I'll say about Jim Harbaugh. Everywhere he's gone, the culture follows. The 49ers, a couple years into him being there, they were in the Super Bowl. Michigan, a couple years into him being there, they won a national title. Last year, he has the best season that the Chargers have had since Justin Herbert has been the quarterback, while kind of moving off of money in that offense, you know, where they had to eat some money and move off of players, and he couldn't build the team the full way he wants. Now another year, another draft, another culture-setting season for Jim Harbaugh. There's some people that are picking the Chargers to miss the playoffs. I just can't see it with Jim Harbaugh at the helm and Justin Herbert. It's a top 5 head coach quarterback combo in the NFL, absolutely. And I just think Jim Harbaugh's a winner. I believe in Jim Harbaugh. Basically, it's very much an opinion piece. Obviously, how much did he do last year? You could say that I'm jumping the gun here. That's fine. I get it. I'm not going to really be able to argue with you in the comment section because I am jumping the gun. It's a little bit of a prediction. It's a little bit of a reach as to what I think the future holds, but I'm stamping my opinion on this. Jim Harbaugh is a top 3 head coach in the NFL. Number 2, Sean McVay. Sean McVay got to a Super Bowl with the Jared Goff, Todd Gurley, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks core. Had one of the more high-powered offenses in the NFL. Had to retool, rebuild it all down, bring in Stafford, bring in new pieces, and got back to that same point and won a Super Bowl. And even dealing with the injuries he's dealt with the past 2 seasons, the Rams have closed out the year very strong, and going into the playoffs, we all thought there was a potential that they could win a Super Bowl. And if that game versus Philly goes differently, who knows? Maybe last year could have been their year. Sean McVay, one of the brightest minds in the NFL, just super, super, super smart, super good on the offensive side of the ball. And I think really develops a strong culture. You could see the way that that young defense is emerging. Yes, some love goes to the defensive coordinators, but Sean McVay is a wonderful, wonderful head coach. And then, of course, the GOAT. We're the GOAT of the coaches right now. I don't mean to start an Andy Reid, Bill Belichick debate, but it's Andy Reid. The guy's been to the last 3 Super Bowls. He's won 2 of them. He has consistently been having the best team in football over the last 5 to 6 years. He's won at different levels with different level players, took McNabb to a Super Bowl, had Alex Smith consistently winning the division and being a playoff quarterback. And then once he gets an elite QB in Patrick Mahomes, he's rattled off Super Bowl after Super Bowl. The guy is an absolute great team builder, a culture guy. You hear the way that former players talk about him. You hear the way that current players talk about him. I don't think there's any debate here. Andy Reid is the best coach in the NFL today, bar none. But I mean, as always, guys, those are just my thoughts. I get it that Dan Campbell and Jim Harbaugh opinions might stir you guys up, but I'm always honest with you. I'm always giving you what I believe to be the truth. Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I appreciate your guys' support on the channel as always. If you love the NFL, hit that subscribe button. I will catch you next time. Peace.